G'day folks, welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore here with you again from Learn to Paint TV and the Learn to Paint Academy. Now this week we're going to do something a little bit different. I know I say that every week, but this is going to be a little bit different. It's a photo that I took walking along the Thames River in London, and it is, of course, Big Ben and the Parliament House there on the river. And as you can see from the photo, it's just going dusk. There's a nice little skyline there with a bit of colour, a bit of orangey glow there. So as always, we're going to use the Moore method of painting for this, our three-step process. And we're going to use three colours and basically three brushes to do most of our heavy lifting here. So let me take you down to the palette and show you. So on the palette here, standard palette I always use, our French ultramarine blue, our permanent alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, and I've got a booster colour which is our cadmium yellow, just to get a few of those highlights on the buildings, and titanium white. So let's get underway with our demonstration here. This is a 9" by 12" canvas panel. Okay, great for practicing on and doing demos and so on. So I'll just take the small flat brush, swish it in some water, and we basically want to get, as a starting point, step one, our drawing. So we want to get a dark tone there just to get our drawing underway. Make sure you get plenty of water in there. Now I'm using the water mixable oils here today. You could do this just as easily in acrylics and just follow the same process. You know, if you've got acrylics, put water in it like I'm doing there. Now, we have to decide whereabouts do we want this to live. And I think because there's these nice reflections in the water here, I think we want to have this sitting just slightly, the sky's nice as well, just slightly above the halfway mark. I think let's just try that there. That sits somewhere there. Actually, no, I think we want to go just slightly below the halfway mark. Okay, so use that as our baseline there where the bridge meets the water. And then we can come in here and we've got to make sure we fit all of it in, right? So again, let's just go for an outline here. So we've got one big tall tower there. There's a spire there of some sort. There's another little tower there. Don't worry about the little jutting out bits that are in this that you'll find, like these bits on top here. We'll pop those in. Now, you know, when Monet painted, he went to London, partly to get out of France when the war was on there. He went to London and he painted this very scene pretty much from the same position I took the photo, I believe. And he did a very loose impressionistic view of it. He didn't put all those details in, right? So we're running out of room, so I'm going to have to squash it all together a bit. That comes up to about there. Okay. Maybe I need to move that over. I'll move that one over there. So this is the main tower here, so we have to obviously get that in and looking correct for people to recognise this subject here. So you just got to be careful I don't go too high and I can fit it all in within that space there. So yeah, his version of it was very impressionistic, and he didn't worry about the details, that was for sure, right? So then we got the clock face there, and we got a clock face there, right? So getting that rough overview is the most important thing, this outline here. Knowing where all the bits and pieces fit, right? So just channel our inner Monet today. And if you want to get hung up on the details, that's fine. Everything's a choice. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we shall be keeping it really simple so that you can see how to do a loose impressionistic view of a iconic sort of subject. And it's going to run through around about here. Now the bridge is important because it gives us the opportunity to pop a couple of little red marks in there for a couple of buses going past. Now it is dusk, so we're going to do it in a dusk kind of setting. which means a lot of muted colours. But the advantage of that will be that we'll be able to then pop in some really nice little pinny highlights of, you know, lights on the bridge and so on. Okay, so that's our bridge there. Okay, so we're off to a good start, folks. You can see the outline there taking shape already, and getting the shapes in the right places is a real key, especially with a painting like this. The tendency is to look at all the details in the photo and get confused and how do we put all that detail together. And if you can avoid that and just see big shapes, then, you know, and you're going to train yourself to do that as well, just see those big shapes. If you can do that, then, you know, half the battle of painting, I think, is sort of almost won right there and then. So now we're going to do step 2 of the Moore method of painting. So now we're going to do step 2 of the Moore method of painting, which is to start to block in some colour. Now when I look at the Parliament House and Big Ben there, what I see is that it's not a darkest dark like we might normally have, but we'll start with a dark, so we'll get our blue and our red in there, right? But it's kind of a yellowy stone, so we'll yellow it up a little bit with our yellow ochre here. Okay. Now you can see that's got a bit green, so pop a bit more red into it. Okay, a little bit more yellow. Not far from the Parliament House buildings, a bit further down the river, it's where you'll find the Tate Britain Gallery, and where I first saw J.W. Turner's work up close. It sort of gave me the real push, or the desire, I guess, to want to start to learn to paint. Okay, so almost got the right tone there. Now remember, this is just a blocking tone, so we're going to adjust it during step 3. So we just want to get roughly the right tone. It has to be the right sort of dark tone here. Now putting that up there, that just looks too green, doesn't it? So let me get more red and more yellow ochre into that. So it can be deceiving when you're mixing things on the palette. You have to go up and test on the canvas, okay? So hopefully that's a better tone right there. Let's just try that. That's better. Now my only concern is it dark enough? But let's pop it up and we can assess that as we go. It's probably not dark enough, is it? You're going to cause yourself problems, and this is where a lot of people just starting out with oils or water mixable oils do run into problems, because their initial layers of paint are too thick. Their mine's a little bit too thick, so I've got a touch more water in there now. And if I keep it thin, by the time we come back to do step 3, a lot of this will be dried off and make our life a lot easier. Get a little touch blue as it gets further away from us. I want the main highlights to be on here, a few little red buses against this dark. So we'll just go a little touch bluer for this furthest away one here. All right. Now I'm happy with that. I'm looking at that, just standing back from a distance and looking at it, and it's feeling right. You know, it's not an exact representation. It's an impression. It's loose, but it's about the character and the feel of it. Is it starting to develop there? And I think it is. So we'll get that, and we'll come in here and we'll just go, you know what? It's pretty much all shadow under here to the water, and the water's a lighter value. So let's just get all that shadow in there. Keep the shadow, you know, you want the shadows to be thin paint. Okay. And then on this final one, it's not fully in shadow. The aperture of the arch opens up a little bit. So you need to account for that. Okay. A little bit on that one as well, but it won't matter for purposes of what we're doing here. So that leaves us with only one thing to do. Tackle the water, right? So I'll get my big brush. It's a big area. Don't muck around with a small brush. Just give it a bit of a clean up. Okay, and all we want to do is get in a silvery blue tone in here, right? Oh, brush is still dirty. So you can see that I didn't clean the dirty water out of my brush, and I haven't cleaned my pot, my water pot. That's okay. What that'll do is just help us to grey that tone. So maybe I'll use my palette knife and be a bit more civilised about it. Get a bit of that blue in there. Okay. So you can see that that's just not an acceptable blue for this purpose. So we need to lighten it back a bit more. Probably going to need a lot more white actually in there. Although we can use that tone, part of it anyway, for the sky. Okay, so I'll just mix part of it down here. So that's just too blue. See that? Just too blue. So we need to get a bit more red and a bit more yellow into it. So having that dirty water in hindsight wasn't a problem, because we need to really grey that blue. Okay, still probably darker than what I've got it, so although it's dark, it's lighter than the dark under the bridge, so that gives us a goal to aim at. Although what I'm looking at is it's actually darker in the closest to the foreground area. So with that in mind, what we'll do, run that through here. You can see it's very thin paint, so I can come back over that later on, and we'll put some reflections of a couple of these in. Okay. And what we can do now is just start to lighten that back a bit. Okay, so that puts us in good position now to tackle. I can see that's drying off the Parliament House and Big Ben. So we're going to make a nice orangey, reddy, pinky glow for the sky there. That's technical talk, orangey, reddy, pinky glow. So we're going to require a fair bit more white, because this is our lightest value is going to be represented here. Okay, so we've got a fair bit more white. And what I'll do is I'll mix this with a palette knife just to ensure we get a little bit more accuracy. So we'll take all that white there. Let's just pop it here. We'll get this red and yellow ochre. Let's just mix those together. Careful I don't get this colour dirty. I don't want to get it dirty. And what I'm going to do with this sky here now is I'm going to paint this a little thicker paint. Okay, a little bit more red into that, pinks it up a bit more. And do we need more white? Perhaps not. I think that should be fine. Okay. Take this big brush again, this one here, and I'm going to just scoop up that paint. Look at that. And let's just come in here and test. Ooh, look at that, that's too much. So I'm going to spread that out, but we've got to do it carefully. Okay, so that seems to be light enough by comparison with the buildings that we put in there. And that's, you know, what ultimately what it's all about. It's about the relationships between what you've already got up there. I mean, at this point, how it looks on the photo is less important than the relationship with what I've already got up on the canvas. Okay. And we can utilize this thicker paint to reshape parts of the buildings if they need them, if they need a bit of reshaping. Fairly thick paint there. I'll start at the top here, and the way I like to blend two different tones of paint is I'll paint down to what we've already done, then I'll dry my brush off, or clean my brush off, and then I'll just lightly feather them together. Okay, now keep in mind we're going to paint back over the Parliament building. We're going to put little details and so on, so we still have a chance to reshape anything that's not quite right there. See, I'm just painting up to that pink. Okay. So now I'll pull the paint off the brush. You've got a fair bit of paint left in the brush there. The only downside the way I paint is that I do tend to use a lot of paper towel, which is a bit annoying, but I'm not sure you can do. But see, just pull it out. I'm not using any water. I want this brush to be dry now because I'm using thick paint. It's a dry brush. I haven't washed it, but I've pulled most of the paint out. Come back up to the canvas here, and let's just now just blend them together. Get some of that pink up into the sky, up into the blue. Of course, it already is the sky. Well, there you go, folks. That's step 2 of the Moore method. We've just been concentrating on blocking in and getting colour down in the right place with the right values. So our lightest part of the painting is up here in the sky, this glow, and down here in the water where the water meets the bridge. Now we've got our darkest darks, and so we've set up a value structure. We've got the basic root colour of the different elements there. And we've put ourselves in a good position here now to really come in and start to put a minimal amount of detail, right? A minimal amount of detail, but enough to tell a story. That's what we're going to work on here. So we're not going to try and replicate a reproduction of the photo by going into incredible amounts of detail. We're just going to put a few dashes, a few marks, just a hint of the detail to tell a story. And we're going to allow the viewer to go, oh yeah, I remember, you know, I've been there, and they'll fill in their own story with this painting here, right? So we're on track, we're going well. Now, if you're using acrylics, you need to pause at this stage because your paint will be tacky. You don't want to keep painting with acrylics when it's tacky. And also with the water mixable oils, I like to just let it sit for half an hour, just to let the water start to evaporate out of it. So we'll take a quick break and then we'll be back very soon, and we'll do step 3. See you soon. Okay, welcome back, folks. We're now going to do step 3 of the Moore method of painting, which is all about getting our details, our finishing touches, highlights, and really bringing this painting to life. Let this dry overnight. Well, you know, when I say dry, it's water mixable oil, so it's still quite wet, but the water's dried out of it. And just looking at, you know, I think we're on track. Probably a little bit light in the water, perhaps need to darken that. And just, you know, now we come into some details and refinement of this painting, and I think we end up with a nice little impressionistic view of you know, Big Ben and Parliament building there. So let us get back underway here with step 3. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to introduce some of the details that sit along the top of these roofs here that sort of bring it to life a little bit more. So for that, I'm going to use a smaller brush. The challenge I've got is I've put this skyline, warm tone. It's fairly thick paint in there, so I've got to now paint into that. So I'm going to be mindful of that as we go. So I'm going to take this small brush. And what I want is to get back to this sort of browny tone that we've got here. So let's just get some blue, a little bit of permanent crimson that goes to our dark, and then we take our yellow ochre and we start to work it back. Now you can see that compared to what's next to it there, it's a little touch on the green side there, isn't it? So we get a bit more red. Okay, and then we push it in. It's getting closer to that tone there. In fact, being a little touch darker, like it is, it's probably not a bad thing because we're going up into the sky here, so it will probably work. And we can come in here and just strengthen up parts of this as well. It's a little bit thin in parts, and it's an opportunity just to rectify any issues that we might have as well. Okay, now there's lots and lots of little details in this rooftop. It's quite an interesting little rooftop, but I'm not going to try and put them all in because we're not doing an architectural sort of rendition of the building here, are we? We're creating a feeling that anyone who's been there as a tourist or grew up in London, they're going to look at this and go, oh wow, that just reminds me of the Parliament houses there. Now, as I apply this darker tone into that lighter sky, what's going to happen is that dark's going to just lighten off in parts there. And that's not a bad thing because it'll just make it sort of a little bit blurry rather than having hard edges in there. And we don't want to have hard edges. Okay, now this one here is fairly important, so I'll just strengthen that up. Little section in the middle there. And then there's a flagpole which we'll put in there as well, just to dress it up a little. So you can see just with those few little touches that little skyline along there now looks more interesting, doesn't it? Make sure I get the shape of this building right. Okay. That's good. Now what we can do, we can come in and we'll get a darker tone. So we'll get the ultramarine blue and the permanent alizarin crimson. And we don't want it that dark. We want to just pull it into that sort of tone we were just using. But it needs to be darker than what we were just using. Because from there we can start to pick out some more of the shadow side here. Just getting some dark accents in here and there. Because even though it's all pretty much in silhouette, you still have to give consideration to light and what creates a sense of form. push it a little touch darker now and we get into that main part of the building. And note that I'm using pretty much pure paint here. This is thick paint, whereas in our drawing stage and in our blocking stage, we were using the paint a lot thinner, weren't we? Now I'm just putting marks in here just to give the indication that there's some variation in that building, but I'm not really copying the photo or anything. Because again, there's just so much detail in there that I think it would be, too difficult to try and really copy the photo. Unless you really, we're going to spend a lot of time and effort and really bring this into a highly finished painting. I think I'm just going a bit more impressionistic with it, and using the approach that we're using, I think makes more sense for most of us. Okay, now I've just mixed up a dark, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this into this water here, like so. We'll come back to this, but I just want to make a note of it now, just to remind me that it is reflecting into the river here, especially these two larger towers. So having a bit of a sense of that will make the painting more interesting. And we'll come back and work into the water in a moment as well. Okay. So couple of little dots and dashes here and there. Fairly subtle, you might not even be able to see that. But it's definitely there. Now, one thing that I can see that we need to fix, we get our darkest dark here, our blue and our red. Okay, lighten it back a little bit with that greenier tone. I've just got a few little issues here with these shadows under the bridge. So, and that probably need to just come down a little bit lower. Oop. Because I put that on fairly thinly, it's pulled the paint off when I use this thicker paint. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with a slightly lighter version of that green. So the blue and the, well, that green there we use, I'll just get a little bit of the cadmium yellow into that, just to give us a lighter value. See that? That green there looks like to me to be a lighter value. And we'll just, at least along the top of this bridge, just run that through there. Just separate it out from the background building. And then we can use that same tone to just perhaps run in here. And it just gives that bridge just a little bit more form. Now the exciting part about this, notice I'm using a smaller brush because I'm working on a fairly small canvas, and we're getting into some details and things. So it makes sense at this point to be using just this one small brush. But probably the exciting thing about this painting is there's a couple of buses going across the bridge. So I'll just take the permanent alizarin crimson, maybe just a tiny little bit of yellow ochre. Okay, so we've got one right here. And I'm just going to do it as a little rectangle there on top of the bridge. Come back and reload the brush. I pulled the brush through some paper towel, reloading it. And there's the second one, right? And we'll just try this and see. But there's a few little lights just here and there. These could be street lights. There's a few little posts there actually. Let's see if we can get some of those posts in. We'll go for a lighter tone, slightly lighter tone. We may have to come back with a rigger brush to pop these in, but yeah, I think we will. It definitely needs to be a lighter tone as well. My little bus now needs a little bit more work. There we go. Don't try and paint those really neat and perfect. Leave a few little rough edges or blurry edges, because I think that will add the intrigue. Now a little touch of white, but not pure white, so I'll just a little bit of that blue. That's too much. So there we go. That's it. And this might be too much, we'll just see. Now, one thing that occurred to me is that we probably need to echo the light of the sky, this tone here, back into the water. So I think probably we need to have just in a little bit here. That's fairly dry. I must have used that paint too thin in the water there. That's okay though. Pop that in there. So I'm going to deviate just slightly from the photo now, because the water is a fair bit darker in the photo. But I think it's nice to tie that sky in. Otherwise the sky is sitting up there on its own, doing its own thing. But it doesn't relate to the rest of the painting. But if we bring that sky colour into the painting, then it's probably going to work a little bit better. A little touch of red into it. Oh, actually, we need to grey it. It can't be that happy, happy blue. So a bit of yellow, and then a bit of red, a bit more blue. Okay, now let's just get this in a little bit thicker paint. Okay, so now where we put those reflections in earlier, we can just soften them into the water now, rather than having them be too dominant. Soften underneath those shadows under the bridge there. We don't want to have hard edges in there. So we'll bring that darker tone up under there. I'll just take a second brush because I don't want to put my blue straight into this lighter tone at this stage. Soften that in. I'm just going to make sure it gets softened into the water a bit. So lastly, I'll just take a little script liner brush, get a bit of water onto it, need a bit of a dark tone so we get the blue and the red again. Just with the tip, I'll just put a little indication of a clock. Now that's fairly wet paint there. And then just a few little marks that are a bit hard to get with the other brush. Flagpole there, we'll come back and put a flag on it. Take that red. It's a Union Jack flag obviously, but don't need to get that in perfectly, just a little bit like that. Alright, well there we go folks, there's our little impression of Big Ben and Parliament House there in Westminster in London. Fun little project. It's a good little exercise in, you know, not getting bogged down in the myriad of details in this old building, this old sort of Gothic style building. Not getting bogged down in those details and just really picking out a few key things that really tell a story of what the subject is, and it's a good exercise in doing that, which is something a lot of us struggle with when we're starting out learning to paint. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. If you haven't done so already, please drop by the Learn to Paint Academy and register for our free course where I go into the Moore method of painting in a bit more detail. And there's 4 different painting demonstrations there for you to have a go at. It just goes into everything in just that bit more detail on what we've covered here today. So here's the web address underneath me here. Go and register for the free course, and I'll see you over at the Learn to Paint Academy. And of course, I'll see you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Happy painting and cheers for now.